you something slightly uncomfortable. When did reality become rude or offensive? Because right now, a photographer is being dragged online, not for lying, not for manipulation, not for Photoshop, but for doing the exact opposite, for showing powerful, in inverted commas, people exactly as they appear. But suddenly, people on the internet and those whose photographs it is, I suggest, or whoever, are crying foul. It's too harsh, too close, too unflattering, too potentially honest. I'm not sure. In today's episode of Outlands, we're talking about that Vanity Fair Trump administration portraits, the backlash, the accusations of misogyny, and the bigger question underneath it all. Do we actually want the truth in imagery or only when it flatters our side? And before anyone starts frothing at the bit, no, this is not a pro-Trump episode. If you know me, you know me. This is a photography episode. So please, and these are all my opinions. So I have to state that from a legal perspective because we know how that administration works. Don't think I'll be getting into America for the next 5 years. They need my social media. Anyway, let's go. Vanity Fair released a series of portraits, images featuring members of the Trump administration. In some parts, they were close up, direct, very minimally softened, no heroic lighting, no political gloss. And almost immediately, backlash followed. One, because of the very subjects of them, we know this. Some framed it as misogynistic, taking shots at the women's appearances. This is cruel, not critique, blah, blah, blah. It went on. Now, for clarity, and I think this matters, the photographer behind the images didn't suddenly adopt this approach for this shoot. This closed, confrontational, detail forward style is something they've used many times before, okay? Across politics, culture, and celebrity. It's a constant visual language, not a one off provocation from them, okay? When they were hired, if you understand how magazines work and as somebody who has worked within that industry, the photographer also had very clear intent. This kind of proximity is meant to cut through the very heavily curated, PR polished images that dominate most political coverage. Okay. Now, you could disagree with the outcome. You can certainly critique it and critique the impact, but it's important to be honest about what this is. Established editorial portraiture, not a stylistic ambush or a vanity project. Okay. So why did it hit such a nerve? Now, I know you're not really used to me talking about stuff like this on the Loud Lens, but I think having seen what's been going on, it's really important to discuss it because I've spoken about this before in the way I do my work, but it's quite interesting to see it now being played on, if I like, on the high level. So there is an ethical debate over critique versus misogyny versus discomfort, and this is where things do get messy. So we need to be adults about the photography. There is a long, ugly history of people being criticized for their appearance. And in the most part, it's often women being criticized. We know this, we can argue this, but we know this. That part is very real. That's not saying men aren't. I need to just correct before you come at me. But for the most part, there's a lot of abuse towards women, how they look. But there is also something else happening here. We are so used to retouched political headshots, soft focused authority lighting, strategic angles designed to project power, shooting up at them and carefully curated public faces. That's and that's when the tools are removed, it feels like an attack. Not because it is one, but because it disrupts the illusion we've been fed. So there is some uncomfortable truth in that. Equality is in representation, sorry, means nobody gets aesthetic protection because of power or gender, perhaps. If realism is acceptable for men, but suddenly misogynistic for women, is that feminism or is it selective discomfort? Because, and I'm going to just clarify, misogyny is basically not men can be misogynistic, women can be misogynistic. You can have misogynistic outlooks. I'm not for abusing someone's physical appearance. It's not. But there are people out there who quite enjoy it. And when women do it and pull them down and say, oh my God, she's so ugly. Like, we know about the term the male gaze, yeah? I know people are going to argue with me, but there's a way, we know that sexual bodies sell and have sold quite a lot in advertising. And that's because most marketing was aimed towards the men, what they believed, and I'm going to put that in inverted commas again, what men liked. And that probably harps on way before, but if we just go back to recent years, women couldn't spend money without their husband's aid. They weren't even allowed a bank card or a credit card without their husband, not too long ago in the past. So the person in control of the purse strings, as they said, was the man, right? So marketing knew they had to appeal to the man, make him feel like the big man. So it was often like that. And then women that kind of were expected to look a certain way because that's the images that were portrayed. So, I mean, I could go into this in a massive detail, but it's interesting now, at a time when we are all about fighting against the filters, everything, when we show an image of somebody that isn't heavily filtered, how peculiar the industry and the community and the wider people perceive it. Is it selective? Does it make them look bad? I don't think that should be the question. I think, is this an accurate and honest depiction within the context of the picture, of the editorial portrait? Now, there is a bigger issue, filter culture, I'm gonna call it that, and reality shock. So let's zoom out. Do you like that little pun? Zoom out photography. We live in a world where faces are often smoothed by default. Lines are erased automatically and texture is treated like a failure. And I brought this up before when I spoke about my time in Norway, the difference between how they edit or and what they have to do if they heavily edit somebody compared to the American market or anywhere else. And the reason I chose the American market is very specific. I happen to be in Oslo, and I think I put it on my Instagram. So if you haven't followed me on Instagram, go have a look there. It's at Khandie Photo. I don't know if it's still up, but I often post when I'm traveling, like things I spot that is like different. And that is particularly in Norway. They tend to favor models that don't look retouched. So I'm used to seeing smoothed off skin, but I happened to be walking past a shop that was selling perfume, and one side they had, I think it was Sabrina Carpenter, and then next to it they had an advert of 2 ladies or presented ladies, I believe. I didn't watch, didn't look too closely at their genders. But, what I noticed was that the Sabrina Carpenter was very soft focused. You could barely see her nose structure. It was so soft focused. Yet the Norwegian one, there was hair on the face, there was actually a spot on the face, only a small little whitehead, but little spot. There was also uneven texture, a very real image, like a very real, we're not talking like, you put your phone on because we all know phones automatically have a level of seeing smoothly on them. This was like as if I was just seeing my mate in the street. This was exactly what felt very real. And Norway have this rule that if you heavily retouch an image, you have to put a sticker on the image, like a mark on the image itself, not in the caption. It also has to be in the caption that you've retouched the person. And it's quite visibly different. And yet I enjoyed the image because it was so unique for me to see a real, I say obviously Sabrina is a real person. I'm assuming it's Sabrina, I can't remember now. But a real face that I would say, "Hey, that looks like how I would see it. That's incredible." And it really struck me how much it made me more interested in the product. So over my time here, yes, I work with a retouching software, but I have actually pulled back my retouch and decided I need to make sure I light better. I need to make sure when I select models, we're selecting models that, I mean, good skin routine is ample if we're using it for a product, but I don't want to retouch somebody's wrinkles too much. I want to be quite real. Obviously, I want people to look great and everything like that. If you've had a bad night's sleep, I'm not going to make you look like you've just stepped out of a hedge. I'm going to do something, but I'm not going to make you, if you're like 30, look 14 in your skin, And I've kind of made that decision myself. And what's great is the software I use allows me to do that, as be as gentle as I want. Still fantastic. By the way, it's called Retouch for me if you're interested. There is a link somewhere for it. They aren't issuing this. But what's even funnier, going back to this original comment I'm talking about, is that even journalists are now visibly branded. So when reality appears, pause, tension, fatigue, age, people panic. Not because it's unethical. I want to just say that. I think it's because it reminds us that power doesn't equal perfection. Authority does not equal the perceivement of beauty. I'm not saying, I want to be very careful how I use these words because I obviously, some people find beautiful is what other people don't, and mix it all up, okay? And leadership doesn't come with some sort of glowy filter. Photography used to reveal. Now it seems every now and then when I see portraits, it's more to reassure people, like you too could look like this, even if you don't look like this. I don't know. And when a photographer chooses not to do the reassurance, but actually just present the person as they are, it seems to get punished, almost like, oh, you should have edited that picture, you should have done this. Is that because we want people to believe that's what they look like? Or do we like the idea that people don't know what they really look like? I don't know. There is a massive impact in this, though, in the industry, I think, because the backlash sends a very dangerous message, in my opinion. If your work makes powerful people feel uncomfortable, you've crossed a line. And I don't know how I feel about that. That should terrify photographers, because documentary, editorial, and political photography for challenge perception, I think it should disrupt and it should provoke discussion like we're doing here. If realism is now considered unethical, then what are we really asking our photographers to do? And what are we being expected with our photography to do? Are we expected to maintain some sort of myth? Because I'm sorry, that wouldn't be journalism or documentary. That would be a branding shoot, right? Surely, or a marketing shoot. Like, surely that's, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. This is just a short episode. I just kind of want to discuss it because here's my stance, both clearly and freshly, and it's my opinion. You can certainly critique misogyny and defend honest imagery at the same time. These things are not mutually exclusive. There isn't a This wasn't a photographer mocking someone's appearance in my eyes, in my opinion. This was a photographer refusing to pretty up, in inverted commas, the power. These are your people. This is what they look like. And it harks back to me when I remember from my art history where people didn't know what members of the royal family looked like back at, the medieval ages, or, even as far as Queen Elizabeth and, not this is Queen Elizabeth, sorry, Queen Victoria. So they commissioned portraits to tour the UK so people would get to know that. When this was going on, like Charles I and all that, they would tour, and they did masks of them so people could see what they look like. I think it's very interesting that we're kind of having to do that again here because people see the pictures and like, well, that's not what they look like. And it's quite a shock to the system. Now, I would say I would find it uncomfortable to zoom right in on me and have lighting that perhaps enhanced it. But I couldn't deny that wasn't what I look like, could I? And maybe the reason people are uncomfortable is because we've confused kindness with softening reality and creating a false image of people. Photography doesn't owe anyone flattering, it owes context, integrity, and honesty. And if seeing a real face feels like an attack, I think it feels more about, I think it says more, if I'm honest, about our visual culture than it does about the image itself, and certainly about the photographer. It's not that the photographer hasn't done this style before, but I will say the attack on the women has been intense. And while I know these women are, in my opinion, problematic in their own way, what it does highlight, and I need to be very careful without my political views coming out too much, which you all know what they are if you know me. Eh. Um, I also hinted at it tonight. I can't help but think we have built a culture where we don't like filters and yet we expect filters. We say outwardly, "Oh, you put a filter on that beauty. No, I'm not buying that makeup because you put a filter on, so it doesn't really show how it works." But then when that person doesn't use a filter, they get insulted for how they look. But that's what they look like. I don't get it. I don't get it, especially when women do it to other women. I find that weird. I find that incredibly uncomfortably weird because I don't know. It's a very complex issue. I want to know what you think though. Is there a line between ethical portraiture and visual harm? Do we want the truth or pretty lies? Please, please, please let me know your thoughts. And I realize this controversial, so we'll try and keep the politics out. The subject matter is obviously very dividing. And but I like the images. I don't enjoy the subject. Please understand. I said I would keep my politics out, but I'm very much not in that MAGA mindset. I don't like the subject matter, but I don't think the images are in any way unflattering. For people that go on about real Americans and all of that, well, that's what you look like. That's the real American you keep touting. So why are you afraid of your own face? I don't understand. See, because I don't know. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna go before I get cancelled. So this episode has made you want to talk about it. Good, I want to talk about it. Can we continue this conversation? Find me on social media. Find me now. I'm gonna put this out right now because I'm recording this or at 9:21 on the 18th of December. So I'm not, please understand, I'm open to debate. I'm not, anyways, it doesn't matter. I'm probably gonna get cancelled for this anyway. Yeah, let's talk about it.